Peace and understanding. Welcome to Critical Thinking. I am the historian and philosopher, Professor Terrell Wayne Johnson. Good day to all. So class, you know we are continuing to push forward and navigate this whole mode situation. So I wanted to come forth today and present this PowerPoint for consumption and for you to install this into your lecture notes. Additionally, we have a new assignment that has been posted on Canvas, a series of enslaved narratives. And what slave narratives are documents or first-hand accounts from individuals who were in this predicament, who were in this situation. This is what we call in history and social sciences a primary source, a eyewitness account. So read through those and follow the instructions. Again, as we go through this, I want you to be aware of one of the, not pet peeves, if you will, but something we want to try to practice. And that is to refrain from the use of the term slave and to try to put into our mental Rolodexes enslaved individual. This pays homage to their humanity, that they were living, breathing entities and not property. So let's start off with this, the term MAAFA. And for all intents and purposes, if you can see this individual, this is a photo that was actually taken of a man in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This image is one of the images, the slavery poster child, if you will. It has been seen countless times. It resurfaces as it relates to history. Baton Rouge, Louisiana was known as a place to break slaves, to make enslaved individuals, to allow them to become seasoned. And what seasoned means in layman's terms is that you would learn your do's and don'ts here. You will learn what it meant to be in the predicament of enslavement, and you would be shipped here. And this also presents or displays the level of humanity or the rigorousness in which slavery was practiced here in Louisiana. So let's follow along, if you will, and stay with me. American slavery in color. So to understand, actually, for all intents and purposes, the term MAAFA, we've heard the term Holocaust. We know that that relates to those that were involved in the Jewish scenario of 4 million Jews being killed by Nazi Germany from 1939 until 1945. But the term MAAFA is an African word that is used to describe our predicament, which was far longer than 5 years and 4 million lives. It was over 20 million lives over a vast amount of time. Some instances proclaim the 300 and some odd years in the New World, but enslavement was going on in other places before they even arrived in what is now known as America. It was going on in Brazil by the Portuguese. And I want you to always keep in mind the big four: France, Spain, Portugal, and England. They were in constant competition to capture and promote a workforce, people to do the jobs for them. So the term MAAFA means understanding the great disaster. Furthermore, breaking it down in a deeper sense, it says that MAAFA is a Swahili word. Swahili is a word that means people of the coast, but it means in greater detail the great disaster, the great calamity, or the terrible occurrence. And this is very descriptive to describe how and what we viewed the dispersing of our ancestors that were displaced and taken away to never return. This is a image that shows young black men and women encapsulated on a slave ship, packaged away, being totally dehumanized. You also have what is known as the Eastern MAAFA, which relates to a period of time that forcibly related to Africans that went across the Sahara Desert, across the Red Sea, and across the Indian Ocean, and they're dealing with these now so-called Arabs, those individuals that are in the Arab world. They were also involved in the MAAFA. So we were taken there and we were taken abroad. Look at this image as it shows and describes the Middle Passage. They are displaying a black man being hung up by 1 foot. You can visibly see here the captain of the ship has this joking, unconcerned look. This person looks very vigorous, while you have people here looking on in shock and awe. So the Middle Passage of the transatlantic MAAFA, if you will, the transatlantic MAAFA, if you will, which I've highlighted, transatlantic slave trade, transatlantic MAAFA, was the largest forced migration in human history. I shared with you in the beginning of the class, I said, what is the greatest crime against humanity? The enslavement of the black man and black woman from Africa. Historians have estimated roughly about 15 to 20 million people. I say that number is extremely higher. The Middle Passage was egregious and very criminal. More than 20% of the individuals that were captured, packaged, and attempted to be taken to a new locale did not survive. If you made it and lived, you had some intestinal fortitude or the desire to live. What a tragedy to display that this was occurring. Many of the people died. Some of the mothers would just decide to commit suicide and jump off the ship, throw their children into the ocean before arriving in the hells and the shores of North America or wherever it was seen fit for you to be taken, contingent upon who you were captured by. Spain, France, Portugal, etc. The Middle Passage is that voyage from point A to point B. Okay? The Middle Passage. Chattel slavery. Chattel slavery. I've mentioned this category and I've discussed it in class, and it is a very hurtful term to understand that chattel means property. That under European law, you were not human beings. Chattel means property. Just as this computer that I'm speaking to you from, the camera in which I'm filming this with, your iPhone, your laptop, your clothes and your shoes are all your property you own. That was the ideology behind chattel slavery. And we talked some of indentured servitude, which was different. Individuals still maintained their humanity and yet signed a contract of indenture for a extended period of time where they would be allowed to, upon completing their contractual agreement, they would be free. They would be able to practice or receive the rights of citizenship of a person in the colony, own property, etc., etc. So chattel slavery destroyed hundreds and thousands of families. The unspeakable violence and a forced lifetime of brutality. Stripped away mothers, daughters being sold, husbands, women being raped. You were property. I said that here in Louisiana, and I love to use the example, and I share with my class, I said, I'm not a New Orleans Saints fan, or the emblem that's on the Louisiana flag, as well as the New Orleans Saints helmet. It is the fleur de lis, the symbol of France. And they would take this emblem in some area. Louisiana practiced the black codes. And the fleur-de-lis, the emblem of the New Orleans Saints, would be branded on the forehead or on the face of someone who attempted to escape. They were a runaway. So these laws were enforced and in place if an individual tried to obtain their freedom. Chattel slavery, not human beings, property. How would you feel if you were said that your humanity did not resonate, you did not have the ability to be free? How would you feel if for perpetuity you, your offspring's offspring would be in a system of chattel slavery? Such was the nature of the system here in the New World. The phases of trauma, as the next slide asserts, is broken down into three phases: the capture, the door of no return, and the enslavement, which is threefold. The capture, of course, by various ways we have explained how this may have happened. It could have been through an exchange where the European used slave catchers that they entered into agreement with by distributing weapons, etc., that were used to help in this egregious fact that was going on by the European. They would actually give weapons. They would actually promote a methodology that was used to assist the white man to allow him to capture those of African descent. The next phase is the door of no return. Once you left the shores of Africa, you would never return again to your homeland. And again, the actual process of being enslaved, I showed you the initial picture of the individual with his back severely scarred. Those who arrived from Africa had to go through a process that is known as seasoning. I mentioned that, and I'll touch it again real briefly. Seasoning, in layman terms, is where you would be thoroughly indoctrinated with the culture of the white man, where you would be thoroughly inundated with this culture. You learned your do's and don'ts. You learned to what extent that what would be expected from you as an enslaved individual. Remember, we try to move away from that term slave. We want to respect the humanity and the individualism of these people of color. So that term seasoning is very, very relevant as it relates to you being broken into a forced life of labor, chattel slavery. The scramble for Africa, this is very important. And again, we talk about the big four: France, Spain, England, and Portugal, and what they did to try to gobble up land. This was not something that the Africans said, hey, come on in and take our land. Africa is the most mineral-rich continent on this globe. Diamonds, gold, even oil is there. So the European, after he went out into the age of discovery, after he went out into the age of exploration, decided, and once he discovered that it was there, he began to exploit these resources. This worldwide renowned conference, the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, is when European powers sat amongst themselves with the support of the Catholic Church, with the support of the church, with the support of the Pope, the highest ranking official in the Catholic Church, that yes, it was ordained by God for you to go in and subdue and take and conquer the dark-skinned colored infidel. This was ordained by the church. And the Berlin Conference is where they decided what portions of Africa that they would take, create boundaries, and they respected those boundaries. So France had a portion. England had a portion. Portugal had a portion. Spain had a portion. Again, It all depends on which of the big four in which your ancestors were taken. I jokingly say all the time that those people of color who are of African descent that may live in Cuba or Puerto Rico or whatever, they're visibly African. Their name may be Hector Gomez, Juan Gonzalez, and they may not speak a word of English, and they say, "Me no black." Yes, you are black. That just alludes to the fact that the Spanish captured your ancestors and you've been in the captured Spain-occupied territory. So this is what you've been indoctrinated with. You are not a Spaniard. You are not Spanish. You are the victim of the Spanish, the French, and the English. So the Berlin Conference led to new forms, as the bottom slide says, I'll just read it, new forms of forced labor and continued resource exploitation, and as I said, the creation of artificial boundaries that still exist to this day. A lot of the internal strife that occurs in the continent of Africa is due to artificial boundaries created by the European, created by the Anglo-Saxon, created by the white man. These boundaries are artificial and were not the original boundaries that were used by the inhabitants or indigenous people of these lands. I said that history and geography are inextricably connected. They're inextricably connected due to the fact that, yes, the people that were conquered, colonized, they did not call themselves Indians. They did not call their homeland America. They did not call, these are European names. They've been doing this for years. In previous classes, I told you, Egypt is a European Greek name. The original name of Egypt is Kemet. Ethiopia is a Greek name, Ethiop. The original name of that land is Cush. The Sudan, the original name of that is Nubia. You can see the connections, and I can name a plethora of geographical locations that were superseded by the influence of the European and his colonizations. Okay, the scramble for Africa. This is very important. I will definitely come back just to you. The Berlin Conference of 1884, it was held in Germany, and the leader, his name is Otto von Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck. So the Berlin Conference, those three things: forced labor, resource exploitation. There's a movie that's out. It's maybe about 10, 15 years old. It's called Blood Diamonds. And it's the movie about how the South African went in and forced labor in their own land and exploited them for diamonds. Now, here's a quick overview about South Africa. The South Africans, this is where the Zulus were. We know about the Zulus. We know about Shaka Zulu. Perhaps that's something that resonates here in Louisiana. The Zulus were one of the longest living dynasties and a warrior class. Okay? The individuals that came in to conquer South Africa, and I'm going to make the connection to explain to you what apartheid was. That system that dysfunctioned and stripped and broke down the native Aborigines people of South Africa. The European came in and began to call himself an Afrikaner, which means a white native South African of Dutch descent, an Afrikaner. And they minimalized the South African. Thus was the plight of the African National Conference and the Honorable Nelson Mandela, who fought with all of his power to rid South Africa and the exploitation of the Dutch. Here's the thing. If you do not understand the system of white supremacy and how it is a global system, everything else will only confuse you. You have to understand that, and don't trust me as I say, always investigate any information you receive. If it is indeed the truth, it should stand the test of investigation. Always ask why. Anywhere you go, as I pose this question to you, people of color or African descent are catching hell in any location where they abide. Is that right? And if they are not catching color, they are still catching hell. They are still subservient. You need to know that. You need to be aware of that. Always as why. The impact. Your ability to communicate effectively will aid in you sharing these images. Now, oddly enough, the European would, in turn, whenever black folk had resistance and the resilience to fight back or slave ship revolts, the European would call him a savage. The Europeans say he was out of control. He was a heathen. But yet, the Europeans stood up. The 13 colonists declared their Declaration of Independence that they were free from England and they were willing to fight and die. As a matter of fact, Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." What a great hypocrisy. How can a white man proclaim that give me liberty or give me death, and then when those who are in a system of virtual enslavement for perpetuity attempt to fight back, they savages, they militants. But yes, there are numerous historical facts out on slave revolts, enslaved revolts, that these people fought on these vessels. As I said earlier, think of the love of a mother on these ships. You've seen the images packed in like similar to sardine cans. Some of the women would jump into the ocean, never to return. Some of the women would throw their babies into the water, saying that it's better for death to throw my child into the water and let him drown and perhaps be eaten by a shark than to be taken to what is to come. Because yes, some of them may not have known what to expect, but yes, they had gotten wind of it. They had gotten wind that the MAAFA was coming. That's the term that began to be used. They would call the European the MAAFA. There were rumblings around that saying, be careful, don't go out there, stay together in groups. The European is coming. He has strange clothes and he has sticks of fire, meaning guns. We can't do anything against him because he has sticks of fire. But yes, there were numerous enslaved revolts, and we talked a little bit about the maroon communities. I'll go into a little more detail than that for time purposes. I'm trying to wrap this up as I have about 3 or 4 more slides. The ongoing legacy of the MAAFA, which is very important. You should understand and know when we talk about the Holocaust, we talk about the Jews and them being the chosen people of God and them being encapsulated into a system of Nazi Germany. Yes, it was egregious. Yes, it was criminal. Yes, it was a travesty. But from 1935 to 1945, that's the period of time of the Third Reich and Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler. The Third Reich, the term Reich in Germany means 1,000-year rule. Adolf Hitler was asserting that Germany would rule the world for 1,000 years. He only made it for 5. He didn't even make it for 5. The war lasted from 1939 to 1945. But yes, you had, as the estimated numbers again assert, 4 million Jewish people that died in the concentration camps. And you have the Anti-Defamation League. And yes, the Jews, it's a travesty. But that does not equate to the MAAFA, your struggle. That does not equate to 600 plus years of enslavement, exploitation, mineral extraction, and resources. That does not equate to your country being carved up and divided by Europeans. That does not equate you being stripped of your name, your language, and especially your religion. That does not equate to that. And as I said, 20 million blacks That's on the low end. 4 million is a far cry. We're not comparison. We're not in a competition for our hurt. We just stating the facts. The MAAFA is not just a historical thing. It continues to this very day in the form of systemic racism, economic inequality, mass incarceration, and social injustice faced by those of African descent on a global scale. This is what I want you to take away from this. This is what I want you to learn. This is not just happenstance. This is not something that is just something that fell out of the sky and magically occurred. This is a system, and the system is operating as it should. I've said to you, just as the human body has a circulatory system, a respiratory system, a digestive system, a reproductive system, a skeletal system. Just as all of these systems are in place, they work to maintain the wholeness or greater good of the body. If one of those systems are not operating properly, that becomes disease. Everything in this system operates to make sure the system maintains or stays in place. That's the actual fact. You need to understand that. Dr. Martin Luther King said, we are not makers of history. We are made by history. That's a reflective thought. I added that post to the slide. So in closing, I want to share something else with you quickly in 3 to 5 minutes about the system. There's a theory that's called strategic amorality. Strategic amorality. I will briefly explain to you what that is, because this is how the dominant culture and their system operates. There's a system of duality that's put in place. Right or wrong, good or bad, fair and unfair. This is the chain in which is placed around our neck. But the small elite few that actually control and operate and pull the levers of the system, they don't operate on, oh, that's good or bad. The system, at its highest level of capitalistic infrastructure, operates on these two premises: essential and unessential. It has nothing to do about if it's fair, if it's just, any of those things they promote. That is not the nature of capitalism. Capitalism is exploitive by nature. Oh, it's good night. Capitalism is exploited by nature. So when you go around, oh, that's not fair. How could they do that? That was wrong. Yes, it may be wrong in a moral sense, but in the inner workings of the levers being pulled of the system, that's not the variables that the system use to critique itself. They look at effective or ineffective. That's the gist of it. Until you begin to understand, until you begin to look at this through the lenses of this perspective, perhaps you may be a little confused. Hopefully you've taken some good notes. You tap into this PowerPoint that I've shared with you. I wanted to keep it at 30 minutes. We're working diligently again to try. I think we tried to do the Zoom meeting. We had some instances where that didn't work, but we're going to continue. I'm going to keep posting perhaps a daily video to keep you going, and I'm working on, we're still going to do the test that I alluded to. So be well, be safe, peace.